Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Jonathan Fadugba, and as always, I'm joined by my esteemed guest and colleague and friend, Steve Wyss. Steve's got a bit of a gleam in his eye at the moment as I look at him on the camera. He looks like he's got a few things to say, get off his chest, so stay tuned, buckle in. We've got about an hour or so of content coming your way, and his head's a bit shaven. He's definitely a bit of stubble's there. He doesn't look like he's messing around, this man, so let me introduce him. How are you, Steve Wyss?
Jonathan, it is great to be on with you. And there's plenty to say, isn't there? It's been a few weeks since we've had a regular episode. Enjoyed the chat I had with Sean Constable last week, the Flint manager. Delighted to say he's 1-0 since that interview. So, hopefully we can turn around that form for Flint. Many thanks to Sean again. But it feels like a good time for an episode. We're just entering this international window now. Club World Cup coming up as well. And, Sweden takes nearly a month off. Norway, 3 weeks off. So it's kind of the first real break in play. So it's kind of assessed the season so far. So, there's plenty to talk about.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about many topics, including the top teams, some transfers, cup finals, a lot to talk about. Some teams letting themselves down maybe in this opening section of the season. We're also going to talk, we were having a bit of a debate just before we came on air, why is there such a long break right now, just as the season's ended, Champions League's over? Is that actually a good thing for Swedish and Norwegian football, having this long break just when there's nothing else to watch? The new season is... Well, the second half of the season in Sweden kicks off 28th of June, so you've got a good 3-4 weeks there with no football, which they could fill that gap, but we'll get onto that. But we're going to start in Norway this week. We've had quite a few listener questions, Steve, so that's interesting. And as you said there, I just want to reiterate, thank you to Sean Constable for joining us. I think that now ties him, or maybe puts him one ahead of Tom Dent as the most interviewed guest on this show ever. We'll see. We'll have to do the numbers. But we're going to start in Norway, Steve. I'm literally going to sort of throw you into the deep end a little bit, if you don't mind, because we've got listener questions, and I'm just going to go straight into it, because why not? So we're going to talk about both clubs in this episode, but Steve, I want to just flag you Big Sig's question, at Big Sig 5, the legend, the man who always gets his question in, and always asks really intelligent questions. Thank you to Big Sig, as always, for your support. He says, did the European adventures hurt Glimt and Djurgården's season? And we're going to talk about Djurgården in part 2 in Sweden. But we've got on the itinerary, Steve, obviously, to talk about Glimt. And I kind of want to throw you that question just as a sort of, not an appetizer, but, a meaty sort of prelude to the pod. Because just looking at the table, Steve, and, just go through it quickly, we've played roughly... in Norway, it's always a bit up and down. Some teams have played 12 games, some have played 8, and then pick any team, and it's somewhere in between. Always a bit of a weird schedule in the early part of the season. I never quite understand that. But Bodø Glimt currently, Steve, are 5th place. Now, I know they've played 8 games, whereas top of the table Viking have played 12. But they're still 13 points behind, Steve. Even with those 4 games in hand, if they were to win every single game, they still wouldn't be top. What do you think about Big Sig question? Has Europe been a factor here? What's going on? Played 8, won 5, drawn 1, lost 2, which for Glimt is, losing a quarter of your games. Is that something to worry about?
I definitely think Europe has had an effect on them. Would you believe this, Jonathan? That there was a phase in all competitions that Bodø Glimt lost 5 games out of 6 recently, including 4 in a row. It was a nightmare for them. They lost both legs against Spurs. Then they got knocked out of the Norwegian Cup by second tier Ålesund 1-0. Then they lost him in the last minute away to their rivals Tromsø, big rivals in the north there. So that's a horror run, isn't it, of games. Then they've also lost against Viking at home to 4-2 after being ahead. So I think they're definitely a bit fragile. I think the problem with the Spurs game was a lot of people expected them to do well in it. And maybe, looking back, it was, maybe expectations were too high. But I didn't see anyone fancy Spurs to do well in that tie, whether from the the betting world, from the football world, or whatever, Glimt were really seen as this massively dangerous public sort of dark horse after beating Lazio. I think it probably would have been better for them if everyone expected Spurs to batter them. So I think they were disappointed how it went against Tottenham. And that can happen in sport. You can get hangovers, can't you? In any sport, bad result or getting knocked out of a competition. And, there's definitely been signs they're dusting themselves off as well. They beat Rosenborg 4-0. They beat Haugesund 4-0. But there's still some lingering elements for them now. I think this break probably comes at a good time. But they've got lots of games in hand. If they win their games in hand, they're right up there. And, we might end up potentially with this 4-way title battle, which we'll talk about soon.
Yeah, most recent result, they got back on the wheel a little bit, so to speak, with a 4-0 battering of Haugesund away from home, Steve, which had repercussions as well. Saltnes, Haug, Blomberg and Helmerson. But you make a good point there about the Glimt Spurs game, to be honest, because it's funnily enough, I've got a friend who's a Spurs fan, and we did our show, didn't we, about saying about beware of Glimt. And after the Spurs won that game fairly convincingly, he messaged me and said, "Can you please talk about Glimt Spurs on the next show? I'll be tuning in." So bit of egg on face. Yeah, they were a little bit disappointing, weren't they, in that one? And you have to give all credit to Ange Postecoglou and Spurs, who got the job done in the end. After that game, I remember saying immediately that I think they'll win the Europa League because I was so surprised how Spurs overturned that, like, sort of almost swatted away Glimt, to be honest. And I think, although, like you said, there was an expectation maybe they were a dark horse, I was really surprised how sort of quite easily Spurs dispatched them over the two legs at the end of the day. And
very,
that
very
really
easy, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that gave me massive red flags. And obviously United, you can't trust United anymore. So I saw that game coming, to be honest. But we won't dwell on that. Congratulations to Spurs. And obviously with Glimt's little knock in Europe, like you said, that seems to have knocked them. Do you put this down to anything other than just a hangover, Steve, in terms of the squad? I saw some comments from Kjetil Knutsen. He's been quite angry about quite a few things in recent weeks. Do you put this down to anything else other than just a bit of a blip and a hangover?
Well, I think they had some defensive issues. Odin Bjørtuft got injured in the KFUM Oslo game, which I do believe came again. That was match day 4, 3-0 win. And I think that was just before the Spurs first leg. And he hasn't been right since. He's missed minutes. And I think maybe he kind of proved that he's perhaps more important to them at the back than people gave him credit for. So that's a possible reason. There's been a couple of niggling injuries in defence. They've had no problems in midfield and attack, to be fair. It's just that defence has probably let them down. I think ultimately the teams have maybe realised that is the weakness of Bodo Glimt. If you can get at them, then they can give up goals, as Spurs kind of proved. I do think a lot of the Spurs result was to do with, we mentioned it before, the athleticism of the Premier League, simply too much for the Glimt to deal with. But Viking second half against 10 men proved again that they're not over these gremlins. I think the best way to deal with Bodo Glimt right now is to fight fire with fire. I don't think you can just sit back against them and offer nothing. They'll eventually roll you over, probably win 0. If you come back at them hard, with the right game plan, then that is where the reward comes. Not many teams will do that, though. So they should be all right in general. They'll dust themselves off. They'll definitely win probably a couple of these games in hand, at least 3 maybe. And the interesting thing is that the return fixture against Viking happens again at a good time, I think, for Viking. It's quite early in the campaign, round 14 on the 19th of July. And I think that week, it's 3 days after Glimt play one of the games in hand away at Fredrikstad. I do think Glimt struggle when they have to play more than one game in a week now, just the way it is. I think they have to prioritise one or the other. So it's quite interesting that the two teams will have played each other, by the end of round 14. And that's it to the end of the season. That could be a huge game looking back.
Yeah, that is a massive game. And Steve, I heard you say to Sean Constable on the previous pod that you'd still have Glimt as favourites for the title. You still expect them to win it. Is that still the case with 4 games in hand? Do you think they'll sort of quickly win those 4 games and get back on track? Or do you see the fixtures maybe becoming a bit of a disadvantage for them because they're going to still have qualifiers, aren't they?
Well, I said before, I think Bran will struggle with the Euro qualifiers. Bran are guaranteed 3 rounds, whatever, of qualifying, and possibly get in one of the group stages, maybe conference. So, and Bran, I guess, think will drop points for certainly in that period, potentially for the rest of the season because of that. So, I don't see them as a contender. Rosenborg are a bit more interesting, but again, involved in European football, probably quite hard for them to reach the group stage. And I still think they're not the finished article. Losing 4-0 against Glimt proved that. Viking are the interesting one. I mean, I tweeted something after they beat Buda Glimt that I felt for the first time that they potentially might be able to win the Eliteserien this season if certain things go their way, like keeping key players fit. They're involved in Europe themselves in the Conference League qualifying. You know, if we're being honest, if they want to win the Eliteserien, they're probably better off getting knocked out of that quite quickly. Because again, I don't think they're a squad that could cope with the rotating, the games that come thick and fast. But they've won 9 out of 12. They've got points on the board. All right, they've got no games in hand, but points on the board in the table are sometimes worth quite a lot, aren't they? And they're the big danger. There's something about them this year. They've got the bit between their teeth, and I think ultimately that it'll come down to that: a Buda Glimt Viking head-to-head title battle. And it's to say they don't have to play each other again after the 14th of July. So it's going to come down to who drops points here and there. It won't come down to like a title deciding game. It'll be who drops points and who doesn't.
Fascinating stuff, and we're going to move on to Viking in a minute, Steve, for an interesting debate about them because they are definitely raising eyebrows. But before we do, we have said on this show we're going to talk a little bit about fantasy as well and just sort of get a quick update, Steve. Now, an interesting statistic or interesting fact for you here: of the top 30 scoring players in the Eliteserien fantasy this season so far, in terms of ranked by position, that is, so top 30 in terms of goalkeepers, split between goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and forwards. Only 3 Glimt players are in that list, Steve, and I can name them for you. They are no defenders, as you mentioned there, with the defensive issues potentially. Saltnes has gone 62 points. He's the 3rd top scoring midfielder, Ulrik Saltnes. Blomberg, Ole Didrik Blomberg, he is on 48 points in the Eliteserien fantasy. And Kasper Ho, 10.7 million. He's owned by 66% of the game, by the way, and he's got 57 points, but he's still not the top scoring forward. Does that reflect Glimt's kind of little bit of a dip? And from a fantasy point of view, is it time to get rid of some of your assets, maybe? The likes of, say, Berg and others? Or do you think they'll come good? Or is it just a lack of games, really? Because obviously they've played significantly fewer games than some of the teams.
Yeah, I was going to say you'd be quite a good spin doctor here, Jonathan. It's simple. I mean, they've only played 8 games. Most teams have played 10 or 11. So I think it's a case of that it's to do with that. But you are right, from the defensive point of view, it's been a little bit disappointing. And in terms of their assets, the time very soon is to jump on the bandwagon. They've got double game weeks to come, starting on 12th of July, round 13. They've got a double that week, and they've got another double 2 rounds later. So you're going to need 3 Buda Glimt players in your team for that period. Load up your Buda Glimt players before they start playing the Champions League qualifier at the end of August. After that, then I'd be looking to... I'd be a bit more cautious because we know that as a bare minimum, Buda Glimt are going to be Europa League group stage at very worst. So that's when their assets might start to be a bit inconsistent with minutes. But this is now the time to get three Buda Glimt players in your team. It's a tough decision. I mean, Kasper Ho is the obvious. You have to get him in. After that, take your pick. Really, there's about 5 or 6 players who you could make a genuine case for in defence and midfield.
Fantastic stuff. And yeah, just to confirm, the top of the league in the Eliteserien Fantasy Nordic Football Podcast League is currently Tom Bird, who's got quite a bit of a healthy lead, actually, at this early point of the season. Steve, in that Nordic Football Pod League, he's currently a good 45 points clear of second place Mikko Hinka. So it's early days, of course, but Tom Bird, who seems to be up there every now and then in these fantasy leagues, he's having a pretty good season, Steve. But let's move on.
Just before we move on, did you know I'm gonna shout out myself here, right? After round
Shout out to me.
two this season in Eliteserien fantasy, I was 374th in the world, and I think I was something like 9th in England, which is for me. It's been a while since I've been that high. Since then I have dropped, as can happen. But for after 2 rounds, I was thinking I could win the whole thing. But those are dreams, aren't they? Maybe for another season. But I've started better in the fantasy this year for Norway, and the last few years have been disappointing for me. Last year I'd actually finished inside the top 2,000. At the moment, I'm. No, that was 2 years ago. I was in the top 2,000. Last year I was nearly as low as 8,000, which is shocking. 2,500 is my rank right now. I'll be happy if I stayed there.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I couldn't see you in the top page of our Eliteserien League, Nordic Football Podcast League. We've got 205 players this season, Stephen. You are currently, having just scrolled through, you're in 54th place, which isn't bad. I won't say where I am because it is way lower than that, 171st place. So I've got some catching up to do, so I can't really talk. But sounds like you had a fantastic start, and let's see if you can sustain it. Don't forget, you can join the league. If you haven't already done so, you can go to fantasy.eliteserien.no. And obviously the code to join it is, I'll just give you the code now if anyone hasn't already joined. We'll post it on Twitter anyway. I don't know if I can find it right now, but yeah.
I've got it. CKW0VB.
There you go. One more time.
CKW0VB, and all the letters are lowercase.
Meat man, so I've got a back post there, saving my terrible cross into the box. So well done. Thank you for that. We'll move on. Join the league if you can. If you're already part of it, let us know where you are in that league and let us know any changes you've got. I've currently got Hull as my captain and Trippic as my vice captain. So I've got a few changes to make in the next few weeks. Not having the best of times, but I haven't played many cards. I've still got 5 transfers available. So that tells you a lot about where I am at the moment in time. A lot of work to do. Steve, you've put it here on the itinerary, so I'm just going to say it as it is. You talked about Viking there just briefly. So I'm just going to drop the question to you. Are Viking for real this season? Is this the real deal?
Yeah,
the top of the league. Just to recap, just quickly, they're top of the league. They have, like you said, played 12. Well, like we said, they've played the most games of any team. 12 games played, 9 wins, 2 draws, 1 defeat, 34 goals scored. Steve, by miles the top in the league, in the division. No one else is even close to 30 goals, let alone no one's even close to 25 goals, actually. So they're flying in terms of goals scored, but they've had extra games. 29 points, 6 points ahead of Brann, who have 1 game in hand, obviously, to close the gap. And Rosenborg also in third on 22 points. But are Viking the real deal?
Yeah, really good question. And from what I've seen so far, they've looked excellent. I've got to talk about the win they had against Bodø Glimt, 4-2. They were 4-2. They were 2-1 down, and then Glimt got reduced to 10 men for. I didn't like the decision. I didn't really think it was a red card, but it was deemed a last man foul. But a lot of teams at that point in time wouldn't even come back to get a point against Bodø Glimt. Bodø Glimt would control the game, but I've not seen Glimt under that much pressure at home in a domestic game ever, really. For 5-6 years, I can't remember a time. And Viking equalised, and what was quite telling, they equalised and immediately picking the ball up and taking it back to the centre circle. They weren't interested in settling for a point. It's almost as they realised, hold on, if we've got any chance of winning the league this year, we have to now take advantage of this situation. It still might not be enough, but they realised the situation, and it was almost like an animalistic desire, a deep sort of huge desire to try and win this league. And 9 wins out of 12. I do think this season it will be the closest they come. They've been knocking on the door for a while, and if they can learn from their past experiences how not to collapse in the second half of the season, don't sell your players, sort of thing. And then it centres around Zlatko Trippic, the key man, the talisman, 32-year-old, who was at the club 2018 to 2020. had a year in Turkey, came back, and ever since then he's been one of the best players in the league. And it's kind of got me thinking, who is the best player in the Eliteserien? And I still think Patrick Berg is the best player at Buda Glimt. But Trippic is really close to that. He's probably the best attacking player. He has massive Armel Pellegrino vibes to me. Pellegrino, of course, who helped Glimt win 2 of their titles. Experienced technical talisman who makes a huge difference. And if they can keep him fit, it's a big if because he's had injury problems, then I think they've got a chance. And coupled that, they've got a really good... I like their defence because they've got a really strong mix of sort of technical and physical. So if they can keep key players fit, a Trippic especially, yeah, I think they are the real deal. But I'm going with Buda Glimt are an exceptional side as well.
Fascinating stuff. In your pre-season prediction, Steve, you got them 4th place. So it sounds like you've kind of changed your tune fairly early on, and they've impressed you enough to sort of see that you think they really can challenge for this title. Talk to us a little bit about the system, the shape. You've mentioned the importance of Trippic. What are the key factors behind this sort of rise to the top? They're a really well supported club as well, aren't they, Steve? Talk to us just a bit about the club in general under this manager.
These guys are a big club, and I just feel like this might be their one chance. Yeah, you look at Buda Glimt, we talked about it with Sean Constable. They have the potential to win quite a lot of titles in the next 5 years because of the sheer money they've got at the club. Well run. But this might be the one chance for Viking. This is their window. You're looking at it's still a joint manager situation here. It's worked really well at the club. Djurgården won a title in Sweden, didn't they? Using that system, 4-3-3 in general, and you've got sometimes they have a back 4, which is basically they're using 4 centre backs in the back 4. So you've got sort of tall lads, physical lads, but the wide fullbacks in the system are very adaptable and good on the ball as well. So it's kind of that can be a really big problem for teams defending set pieces. So you send these big boys forward. You're getting more big boys on the pitch. They've scored a lot of goals from set pieces. They've got a great long throw. Trippic also has an incredible long throw on him, let alone the set piece deliveries he puts in. So I think the defence, although it has conceded goals, it contributes goals at the other end of the field. Hegheim is how many goals has he scored this season? Far too many for a centre-back. 4 goals. 2 goals and 4 assists. And that's because he puts himself about in the box from these set-piece situations. So, yeah, I really like... there's still, for me, a goalkeeper doubt. I'm not sure about the keeper. Christopher Claassen seems to be getting the job done right now, former Leeds man. But that defence has certainly... It's an interesting defence. You wouldn't call it rock solid, but it's a problem for teams both attacking it and then having to defend against them when they come forward.
Now, their manager's a bit of a character, isn't he, Steve? Looking into him, Beate Lunder Arsheim. He's not quite a one-club man, but he is almost as much of a Mr. sort of one-club man as you can get, really, isn't he? 222 appearances for Viking, Steve, as a player. He puts it, and he's also been a manager now. I think he's been there for about 8-9 years as an assistant, and then obviously as head coach in 2021. Nickname, according to Wikipedia, is Batty. As he apparently his playing style was similar to former Leeds man, Steve. You will remember, of course, David Batty. So there's certain parts of England, at least when I was younger, that Batty thought it was a bit of a slight against someone. But it's a tribute there to the former England international David. Steve, he's the 8th all-time appearance maker for Vicky. Just talk to him about you mentioned there that 4 centre back system in a way at times. It reminds me a bit of Tony Pulis at Stoke when he used to try that, didn't he, at a certain point in his career. 4 really tall, sort of physical centre backs, and not much pace in there, but just literally win everything aerially. Talk to us a little bit about what he's done, what he's changed maybe over the years. Like how has he moulded this team? Because Viking have had hard times, haven't they, in the past 5 years as well?
Yeah, they've had their ups and downs. It is 2 managers in charge: Beate Lunder Arsheim and Morten Jensen, officially. So these 2 have worked with each other, I think, for 4 years now, knocking on 5 years. And they've had Norwegian Cup success. They've had some high league finishes. There was one season where they didn't finish very high, but the club kept faith with them, and it's kind of paid off. I think recruitment's got a lot better with the club. I mentioned the 4 centre backs being in the team. It's almost been by default rather than design, because they've tried so many sort of fullbacks or wingbacks, and it's never worked out for them, whether it's injury or something like that. I mean, the likes of Bierschel, he was earmarked as being, the main sort of right back for years to come, but he's always injured. They've had so many left backs do the rounds in the last 4 or 5 years. So in the end, I think they just decided, hold on a minute, let's get a few centre backs in who can play left back and right back. That might seem a little bit alien to like listeners who only watch like Premier League and things like that. But in countries like Scandinavia, it's not unheard of for players to be very, very adaptable and can play multiple positions. So they've ended up, like I say, with this mix of really good physical, but they're good on the ball. They've got pace, unlike the Stoke situation back in the day. And it's a big problem. And then midfield as well, they've got that same sort of mix. So I think it's a combo of the tactics always been very similar, 4-3-3. You know what you're going to get with that. It's a Norwegian thing. But I think the recruitment and sort of tweaking with this defence has really paid dividends for them so far.
Yeah, you did also say on that show with Sean Constable, didn't you? You were talking about some maybe lack of top quality centre halves in Norway, which I found to be a very interesting point as well. Maybe at the international level, it's definitely worth, if you haven't listened to that interview already, by the way, even if you haven't listened to past Sean Constable interviews, there's definitely some insights in there and a really enjoyable conversation. Steve, you kind of had them in your top four. You've talked about the importance of Trippic. He sounds like the key man. You've also sort of said that they could be title contenders. Are we looking at a sort of four-way fight for the title here? Because you've also got, moving on to teams like Brann and Rosenborg. They're not having too bad a season themselves either, are they? So where do you look at this title race, coming up to sort of not quite the halfway stage, but maybe 33% into the season, third of the way in? How are you looking at things? Because Rosenborg have only lost one game out of 11. They've won 6, of course, and Brann have lost only 2. Rosenborg, incredibly, they've only scored 13 goals in 11 games, but they're still third. Whereas Brann are scoring a bit more, but also conceding quite a few more, considerably more. In fact, 10 more goals conceded in the same number of games played. How are you looking at this title race, Steve? Is it a four-way race? You've also got Fredrikstad one place below that, but how do you see things?
Yeah, for me, it's a four-way battle at this point in time. It would be disrespectful to the likes of Brann Rosenborg to leave them out of it, because if everyone wins their games in hand, you've got Viking 29 points, Brann 26, Rosenborg 25, and Buda Glimt would be on 28. So, yeah, of course, it's a four-way battle. I've said before, I do think Brann will fall off. I've said that right from the start of the season. They have been better than I thought they'd be, Brann, to be fair. I did wonder about the manager change, but they've got plenty of goals in them. The defence, I think, will let them down in time, and also the build-up of the games in the Europe. Rosenborg, I really like what they're doing. Said that pre-season. I really enjoyed the interview you did with the sporting director there. It felt like they were back on track. They're way more control of their games this season, defensively sound, perhaps lacking goals. Let's see how the summer transfer window deals their cards. I think Rosenborg, at this point in time, I would go Bodo Glimt, Viking, Rosenborg has been top 3 and Brann in 4th. But Rosenborg, I still, if Rosenborg got in the mix, it wouldn't surprise me. And as I say, Viking are very much, no one had them down probably for 29 points after 12 games. So definitely a four-way battle. It could be one of the most exciting seasons we've had for many a year in Eliteserien. I say my prediction down the stretch, say the last 4 or 5 games, I believe it probably will come down to Bodo Glimt Viking.
For each of these teams, because we do have a few listener questions about some of the teams, who are the difference makers in this race? We talked about fantasy, and there's a lot of reasonable players in that top 30 that I mentioned there, just in terms of the top, the top scorers. There's also quite a few from Brann. I know we've got the games differentials, which does make a big difference. You look at someone like sort of Viking as well. They've got Hegheim, who's the top scoring defender. Pereira is the second top scoring defender in fantasy. For Rosenborg, there's a lot of factors, isn't there, Steve? I know, but just looking at it as a sort of sample size, you've got Hegebo, top scoring striker up front, obviously doing quite well, 9.8 million on fantasy. Who do you, if you were to sort of name 3 or 4 players maybe in each team, or 1 or 2 players in each team, or 3 or 4 in total, when it comes to this sort of like four-way race that you've identified, who do you think are going to be the difference makers? Is there anyone that could leave in the summer, this window coming up now, that also might affect things?
Well, this is why you probably still give the edge to Buda Glimt, because you could, you asked for 2 or 3 players. You could probably name 5 or 6 at Glimt. Do you know where I'm coming from? They've got a lot more options there. If we look at, say, Viking, obviously Trippic would be the main man. If anything happened to him, if he missed a month or more, they can't win the title. Simple as that. He's so important to them. So they've got to wrap him in cotton wool. Hegheim in defence is obviously a key man, because he can play centre back, right back, or even left back, I think. So he would have to be him. And then, the third player, I think, it's just someone who's got a bit of quality about him, who's starting to improve, is Edvin Ustbo, mentioned before as a potential wonder kid. So they would be the 3 I would say for Viking. In terms of Brann, it's pretty obvious the attacking players: Hegebo, Castro, who's missed recent matches through injury, and keep an eye on Bard Finner, who's kind of refound his mojo a bit after a difficult sort of, 9 or 10 months. He's just starting to find his mojo again. And I think the worry for Brann is that there's not really anyone I'm looking at defence or keeper that is perhaps that key this season. Saltvet has been up and down, so that just kind of shows their deficiencies. And then Rosenborg, Nemsik, I really like him, defender, centre back. Thomas Nemsik, he's ruled out until the end of June, which is effectively just 1 more game, 2 more games. I think without him, they're not as good. He's possibly played the best of anyone in his position this season. I like the goalkeeper, Tangvik. I think of all 4 of them, they might have the best keeper, Rosenborg. A keeper can make the difference in their title race, can't it? And then Broholm, for me, in midfield has been excellent. Him and Nipan, he's been better than Nipan. I don't know what's going to happen with Sverre Nipan in the summer. His minutes have been not as many as I thought this season. Will he leave? Really like Broholm, though. And I suppose we've got to give a shout out to Pereira, who has been an excellent defender, but he can play in a lot of different roles. He can play on the wings as well, left or right. So, he's definitely a key player. I mean, based on what I'm saying there, you're probably thinking, Rosenborg sound quite good here, Jonathan. And I do believe that in the long run, they're setting themselves up. It might just be a year too soon for them, though.
Yeah, some very interesting names there, Steve. I'm jotting down some notes in terms of fantasy, but I think, as you said, that it's quite a compelling race, and teams have all got a bit of sort of slightly different style about them, haven't they? Some of them have got an individual sort of what's the word, talisman. Some have got kind of a bit more of a team game about them. Some are a bit more attacking. Some a bit more defensive. It's shaping up to be a potentially interesting title race, really, to be fair. So definitely want to keep an eye on, Steve. The interesting thing here is there's one team I can't help but notice have not been mentioned. And as I sort of look down the table, I can't seem to really find them, to be honest. I look down one below Rosenborg and I see Fredrikstad. I look down one below Fredrikstad and I see Buda Glimt. I look one down below Buda Glimt, I see Tromsø, their rivals. I look one down below Tromsø, I see Sandefjord. I see Sarpsborg, I see Kristiansund. I see Bryn, Steve, the newly promoted Farmers. But I don't see a team who a lot of people have tipped and who've obviously, this past 5 years, been one of the dominant forces, Steve. And that is obviously Molde, who we then come to in 11th, which really surprises me in a way. They've lost 5 of their 10 games played. They don't have the excuse of having sort of only played 8 like Glimt, for example. They have played 10. They are not too far away from relegation. I mean, if Godset, who are in 14th, win their game in hand, obviously, it'll be 3 points. So let's move on to Molde, Steve, because I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. New managers, all the optimism and enthusiasm. You have sort of said about them maybe needing a rebuild. You've talked about them in season previews and things like that. You've had a few things to say over the past year or so. And I'll just sum it up by the question that we have from, I think, a new follower actually today called ESN Fish, who says, what's gone wrong for Molde?
Yeah, plenty has gone wrong. I've got them wrong. I predicted them second this season. Now, part of that sort of prediction was because they're not involved in Europe, and I kind of factored in. I figured that certainly from August onwards, they would have a massive advantage on everyone else around them. And they still will have that advantage. But they've got to sort themselves out before then, because this is not working for Mathis Hogmo at the moment. I think he's under serious threat. I think several fans probably might want him gone. And I think they've got to make a decision very, very soon about him. They've either got to let him go and kind of accept that this maybe not working, or they've got to back him. Simple as that, and say, right, you're here for the long haul here. We're going to get the players that you want in and do it that way, because it's just there's far too many deficiencies. The squad is old. Sean Constable mentioned that in the interview last week. It's got quite old. The best Magnus Walker Eikram for it was probably about a 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 year period where I thought he was the best player in the Eliteserien. A really strong technical guy. There was an interesting tweet that John Bodestad put up, former guest on the show, works up there for TV2, and he basically made the point, Eikram has to come off after about 65, 70 minutes in every game. Wouldn't he be better now to leave him as a super sub? Let him be on the bench and he can impact the game in the second half when it really matters. And I think he's absolutely right, is John Boristad there. Stuff like that. I don't believe the squad is what Hogmo wants. But some of the results have been really, really poor, especially at home. And that's been another problem. The atmosphere feels like a morgue, a bit like a library at times. There's no real excitement there at Mulder. I don't know whether they've been used to so much success and stuff like that. They've got great infrastructure. They're obviously well funded after some good European runs. But, yeah, I think this is not working out for Mulder right now. There's been a sprinkling of decent wins, like the 3-0 at Brown. But there's too much going wrong now. And, I think the break definitely comes at a good time for them. They need to sort themselves out, though. Make a decision with the manager. They're going to have to bring players in if they keep him. And he gets them playing the way he wants.
Too much going wrong. Time for them to have a break. Maybe have a Kit Kat. Steve, is the verdict from our esteemed Norwegian expert. Do you know what? I was watching Hacken the other day, and this is probably going to be a bit of an existential point, Steve. I don't want anyone going into sort of like a bit of a pensive mood here, but it made me think about like how fleeting life is, isn't it? Like that Hacken team with Hogmo was like, I was just watching them and thinking they're not the same anymore. We'll get onto Sweden part 2, obviously, but I just was watching them and thinking that was one hell of a team they had, and all the players that have come and then left. Benny Traore and the players they had there at that point with Hogmo running the show. And if you look at some of the players who left, it's not quite worked out for them where they've gone potentially. For example, Traore went to Sheffield United, didn't quite work out for him there. And Hogmo, it doesn't seem like it's maybe. I know he went out to Asia, he had a stint there, but he's come back and it's not. I feel like Hacken miss him and he misses Hacken in a way almost. What is going on with Hogmo at Molde? What's been the problem? Because we know he's got this attacking style that he likes to implement. Obviously, when he was in Sweden anyway, he won the league there. He was so popular, won the league in the first time in their history. He was such a legend at that club for sort of a while. What's your sort of theory? You just said it there. They either have to back him or sack him. It's doubled down, or you've got to go all in with your chips, or you've got to sort of fold a few here. So, can you just sort of identify what he's trying to do? What's he trying to change? Is he trying to bring in new players? Is it the fact that new players haven't gelled? Has he not got enough players? Molde have always had a bit of money. I know you said that they've got a bit of an ageing squad, but what is the dilemma facing Hogmo at this point in time, and what can he do? Because it does still seem quite early after 10 games to be calling for his head.
Well, I was very excited about him in the pre-season preview, even before they played the Euro games. They had Paco Johansson as the assistant manager. Former Häcken boss, former Odd boss, highly rated. It's been revealed he's going to leave the club now. So, the axe often falls, doesn't it? And maybe this is the scapegoat for now.
Is there a reason why he's leaving the club? Sorry to interrupt, but is that something, a sign of deeper problems?
I don't know. There is no reason given. Hogmo was asked by TV2 before the Bram game. That was last week. Will there be a replacement for Paco Johansson? And ask him, are you in talks with anyone? And he said, we could well be in talks. Yes, but he didn't reveal anything. I don't know. It's a bit of a strange one, isn't it? But, Mulder's problems were kind of summed up in the game against HamKam. He lost 2-1 at HamKam. one of their own players scored against them. Roldsoy, who's on loan there. And I feel like a lot of their young players, this is a squad overall that has had young players, not necessarily through their own system, but they've bought young players. They loan them out, and some of these loanees have actually done better away from the club. It's a bit like Man United, Jonathan. Like, get them away from Mulder, and they seem to perform better. But I think it's a case of that the squad has ended up with too many probably older players, massively injury-prone players. Like, there's so many injury problems within this whole squad. It feels like it just needs probably gutted now, really. A lot of people thought it was maybe the Erling Moo regime caused it, but it's still ongoing. Gulbranson, he's a fantastic striker. Scored against Brand, but never looks fit to me. Last time I saw him, he came off in the Viking game. He walked straight down the tunnel. I mean, that I don't know whether he's injured or not, but immediately there was alarm bells. It kind of sums them up. I think what they've got to do is they've got to make a decision on Hogmo. If they keep him, then they're going to have to. I think I would shift on 4 or 5 players and bring in younger, dynamic, energetic, athletic players. That's what Hogmo needs. Think of that Hacken team. There were sprinklings of experience in it, but it was driven by young talent. A little bit raw at times, but the athleticism of that team, that's what springs to mind with me, Jonathan. It was always so lethal and good to watch on the break.
We'll move on from Mulder. It seems like there's a lot of problems there. It's never good when someone like that leaves. I remember you saying on the pre-season show, Steve, that's the Paco pair double is almost like having Mourinho and Guardiola on a touchline. So I guess you could say it's worked out as would be expected, I suppose, with the early separation. But if you could name 1 to 2 players top, Steve, we'll wrap it up now. But just you've just mentioned they need a more dynamic squad. If you had to handpick 2 players from Eliteserien, any other club, except Glimt, obviously, maybe they might not be able to attract good players right now, to inject into that side, that Per Mattis Hogmo could then rejig this team around, who would you pick?
They need pacey players. They need wide players. So I'm thinking Omar Farji. Sorry, not Omar Farji. That's the guy at bloody Degerfors. Marco Farji. To be fair, Omar Farji might do them serve them well as well. But Marco Farji from Storm's Godset, I like the look of this lad, and I think he would really help them out in that area. I suppose if they could handpick someone like Blomberg or Uspo from Buda Glimt or Viking, or Broholm for Rosenborg, but they're not going to get them. Realistic transfers, I don't know, maybe Orjeta from Sarpsborg, although I feel like he's probably better than Eliteserien level. So there's some suggestions.
Well, if anyone from Mulder's listening, they might be calling you up, Steve, to do some scouting for them. So there you go. We'll move on. Although they having heard what you recommended Degerfors player, maybe they won't be calling you up.
Hey, he scored 5 goals in one game. Can't knock that.
He did, to be fair. He did, you're right. You mentioned the Godset player there, and we don't often have this in Eliteserien, Steve, so this is a bit of a juicy... Maybe it should have been higher up the order. It's a bit of a... the Grim Reaper's been around Eliteserien recently, hasn't he?
Yeah.
A few people have got the chop, which is quite rare in that league. So... I don't know, we might have to put that in the headline or something, because it's quite a rare occurrence, isn't it? I remember there was a season where nearly no one lost their job, which is almost unheard of if you're an English football fan. Let's talk about this, Steve, because there's been multiple managerial changes in the last few days. 3, in fact.
Yes. There's been... Sanjeev Manoran got relieved of his duties at Haugesund. He's been replaced by a Finnish coach, former HJK manager, who I'm not even going to try and pronounce. I think he's got a nickname, which we'll try and use for him. And then Stroms Godset and Jürgen Isnes agreed to mutually part ways. And it looks like the HamKam manager is Jakob Mikkelsen's on his bike as well. He's going to become the new Danish women's national team head coach. So, I mean, with Hogmo under pressure as well, this is, kind of unheard of times, really, for Eliteserien. The managerial situation is usually pretty stable throughout the season, but maybe we were due a season like this. I'm trying to think of anyone else who might be under pressure before the end of the season. who knows? But yeah, I mean, the Godset one is interesting. I mean, just take a look at their home record, Jonathan. It's not very good reading at all. Played 5, lost 5. You can't do that, can you? Any team. And Marienlyst Stadion is, you've been there. It's a fortress, really, when the crowd are on their side. So that's the biggest damning statistic, which probably led Godset wanting to make the change.
Yeah, shame. He was a guest on the podcast. I mean, I can't believe it was a year ago now, to be honest. It was literally nearly a year since I was in Norway. So time really does fly. I'm in quite an existential mood at the moment. Getting quite pensive, Steve. Life, fleetingness of life. Because I can't believe a year's passed since we interviewed Business. If you go back, you'll be able to have a little listen to it. Although you might say it's irrelevant now because he's left. But I've been trying to find this Haugesund manager, Steve. But I googled Haugesund. The first thing that came up was Haugesund mattresses. And apparently there's a type of IKEA mattress called the Haugesund mattress, which has now made me really sleepy and really want to lie on it.
Well, I'll tell you what, the fans have not been sleeping easy on the west coast of Haugesund.
It looks like a good mattress to me. It looks really comfortable.
Sure, it is.
But I just wanted to get the manager's name. You said you couldn't pronounce it yourself. I'm going to give it a go. Tony Korkiakunas is the new manager.
He's got a nickname. Is it like Toke? Toke, I think, is his nickname.
Yeah, hopefully I've not butchered that. But he's been around the block, actually, to be fair, Steve. He's managed at Gninstan, Finland's under-19s, HJK assistant. He was an analyst at Finland national team. Lahti, HJK again, as you mentioned, then went back to assistant, and then again at HJK. So, interesting sort of backstory. As you said, his nickname's Toke, or Tiku. And the reason, apparently, according to Wikipedia, is for constantly chewing toothpicks during the match. So, there you go. He's also got a Master's of Education degree and has worked as an elementary school teacher. So, an interesting character there, Korkiakunas, or Toke, as you can refer to him, Steve. Do you think he'll get much of a tune out of that side? I mean, I know you lamented them on the last show. You said they were looking really bad.
To be honest, this is the first sort of appointment or signing that I quite like at Haugesund. I feel like this bloke feels no nonsense to me. I don't know about you. I read things about him. Lost the first game 4-0 at home to Buda Glimt, but there were moments in that they were all right. Listen, there's at the minute the way Godset have started and K from Oslo have started, they're only 5 points off the playoff spot, and they survived in the playoff last season. I don't think it's going to be pretty under the new manager. He's got a 3-week break now to work with the team, but I don't think they're going to they're not just going to roll over now for a bit. Probably for the next 10 games, they'll give it a good go. They'll be respectable, give the fans maybe something to cheer, and then let's see where they are after 20 games. If it's obvious that they're going down, we might see them kind of give up a little bit maybe towards the end of the campaign. But I think this new manager gives them maybe some chance of surviving. In terms of Godset, I mean, I still think the squad's pretty poor, so let's see what he can bring in. Sure, you'll bring in a couple of Finnish players maybe. And Godset, for me, the big problem is the actual squad there is probably not. It lacks enough depth. They've never had a proper striker really. Under Isnes, Melkersen was the big signing. He's injured till the rest of the season. You can only deal with the cards you've got on the table. I think Isnes, I feel a bit sorry for him there. Fagi's had a great season for them. The defence, when it's at its full strength, is decent, but it lacks depth. And Logie Thomason, who I thought would be a really key man for them this season, has been struggling to even get in the team at times. So they have got to get into that transfer market in the summer. Have Strom's Godset and add 3 or 4 players in all areas combined.
We'll leave it there. I mean, obviously we've got also the managerial change at HamKam. Steve, are there any candidates that you think would be suitable for Godset?
That's a good question for Godset, actually. I don't know. I'm struggling a little bit because they've had lots of. Why not? But I feel you've got to deal with quite a limited squad, right? Which might mean you need quite an adaptable coach. Like if a coach came in and said, I don't know, like a Ruben Amorim and said, right, I'm playing 3-4-3. It has to be 3-4-3, whatever. They probably haven't got the players for it. Some weeks they might have to go 4-4-2. They might have to go 4-3-3. Some weeks they might have to go 5 at the back. So I'd like to see an adaptable coach come in there. But whoever comes in, they've got to back their man in the transfer market this summer and bring some weapons in. Especially, they've got to get a striker, but they need weapons all over the field. I don't know, maybe I don't know who, but they just need someone adaptable. And in terms of Ham-Cam, that would be a blow. I think Mickelson's done well there. Maybe we might get a managerial merry-go-round. Could Isnes turn up there? Ham-Cam, a pretty well-run club. I think they'll make a good appointment, whoever they get. They'll have. This probably would have hit them a little bit blindsided, maybe. But I'd imagine some sort of defensive-minded coach maybe there, not willing to be ugly if needed, would come in. Not sure who again, but I trust them to make the right decision.
We'll wrap it up. Great stuff there, as always. Steve, let us know your thoughts on X at Nordic Foot Pod, or on the YouTube channel if you've got a managerial suggestion, someone that maybe should be considered, and your thoughts on the sort of the sack race that's going on at the moment, or like you said, the merry-go-round. Steve, I'm going to wrap up part one with a couple of listener questions. They relate to our final talking point as well. I'll start with the second question and then I'll finish with the first question. So if you can get your head around that. We've had Paul at NUFC Pro on X say, apart from the obvious Howseth and Epan, who would be your thoughts on the next 2 or 3 to move to a top European league from either league? So we can talk about that maybe in part 2 or after you answer this next question, which relates to one of the talking points we have in Norway, which is at Sponchi. Long-time listener of the pod, really always asks good questions and always enjoy interacting with him on X, or him or her on X. Sponchi, thanks for getting in touch. Says, should we put more respect on newly promoted teams' names? The likes of Bryn this year, K from Oslo, Christiansen, yes, my boys, have been able to compete fairly well. And you've also got on the itinerary here, Bryn, the Farmers, 3 wins in a row. So what do you think to Sponchi's question, Steve? Do Christiansen and co deserve more respect?
Well, it's a constant theme, isn't it? I said it before in the preseason pod. I predicted them bottom. It's happened before, where you look at a squad and you think they're nowhere near good enough for Eliteserien level. Ranheim were a prime example. I think they finished 5th or 6th, Ranheim, that season. So teams that logically should be rock bottom aren't. Even Yerv weren't that bad that year. I think they did finish bottom, but they gave it a bloody good go. So this is a pattern and a theme, isn't it? How do you sort of solve this issue, in terms of the analytics of it? You just kind of got to maybe just kind of respect the desire, the human desire, right? And the willingness to fight in the first season. I mean, K-Fum was struggling in the second season. Now the second season syndrome can happen. Christiansen have done this as well. And I mean, in terms of Bryn, fair play to them. When they first came into the league, I didn't really like what I saw. The pitch was horrendous. It was a cabbage patch, literally. And it looked like they were trying to grind their way to survival. And what's happened with Bryn, I think they've realised, hold on a minute, if we're going to do that, we're just going to get run over and go down. We might as well have some fun, swing from the hips. And they're now trying to get involved in some shootouts. And they've won a few shootouts. They've got a striker. I said he was one to watch a little bit, didn't I? Moreira. And he's done really well for them. And they're a physical team who no one really would probably want to play against them. Moreira's done really well. I think he scored 4 goals and 4 assists. So if they can keep him, they might have a chance of staying up, Jonathan. I'll give them a lot of credit for changing their style a little bit and actually be willing to have a good go and they've realised their mistakes early and now developed into this team, which are a good watch, really. And some of the Man of the Match awards that have been given out in their games have been quite incredible. I nicknamed them the Farmers. There's been, I mean, there was a really interesting one. The first week, the goalkeeper got given 4 trays of eggs for his Man of the Match performance. A lamb, an actual live lamb, was given out as a Man of the Match award. They're involved in a cup game against someone called Varhaug. I think they're like 4th or 5th tier, and I don't know whether they were trying to return the compliment. But a 23-kilo pig, not a live pig. This is like something that would go on a hog roast. Was given as Man of the Match that day. So it feels like all their games now, if you're Man of the Match, you could get something incredible. Cabbages were thrown into the crowd in the most recent win. It's a truly It's actually an incredible place. I feel like, the sort of place that people might want to visit Norway and visit this unique stadium where these sort of things happen.
Quite a little tasty menu they've got cooking up there. A lamb, a pig, some cabbage, and 4 trays of eggs. That sounds like a healthy dinner, Steve. And I'm out of eggs, to be fair, so I might have to go and sign up for Bryn and be man of the match because I need to get down to the shops and buy myself some eggs. So wrap up there. I think that could be the episode title, in fairness. One other interesting fact about Bryn is the massive Erling Haaland mural I think they've got just near the stadium or outside it. Obviously, he's come through their sort of youth system, I believe, there. So they really do have an interesting story, and maybe someone that we should, maybe a club that we can focus more on as the season goes on in terms of maybe getting a guest on or something like that. But keep an eye out for Morera, and as you say, their teams deserve maybe a little bit more respect down the bottom. Christiansen will always have my respect, by the way. Coming up in part 2, we're going to move on to Sweden, where there's a lot going on. We've had a cup final. Got teams at the top of the league who no one would expect, and plenty more else to talk about. So get yourself some cabbage or some 23 kilo pig if you've got time, and tune in after this short break.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. Hope you're all doing really well. And now I'll talk about the Allsvenskan matters over in Sweden. Jonathan is our specialist up there. Before we talk about the league table and stuff, a question which we mentioned in part 1 from Paul on Twitter at NUFC Pro. Aside from the obvious, with Nipan, who would your thoughts be on the next 2 or 3 to move to a top European league from either of Allsvenskan or Eliteserien? So, it's a good question because we're getting to that time of year now, Jonathan, where the transfer window's coming up. We know that top talent, sadly, exits the league in the summer. It's just the way of life, probably more than in the winter. So in Sweden, there's probably been more of an exodus than Norway in recent years. So who would you sort of look at, perhaps, from Allsvenskan, who's the next big star?
Yeah, really good question from NUFC Pro. Steve, I'm going to go with a couple of talents. One who's not really getting a huge amount of, he's getting game time, but not really set the world alight the season so far. But I think he's got massive potential, and I still got faith in him, and I'm a bit surprised he's not really played more of a prominent role in this Malmo side. I'm going to go for Hugo Bolin. He's a 21-year-old, 2003 born midfielder. He can play out front as well, but he's sort of maybe like a false 9 type player. He can play on either side. Very sort of creative. He gets goals. He knows where the goals is. He's a bit of a sort of a Sebastian Nanasi light maybe type player. High shot volume. He gets a lot of shots per game off. He can position himself on the right hand side. He can position himself off the left. Really versatile player, which I think maybe has actually cost him a little bit in this Malmo team. There's been so much rotation. We'll talk about it in part, as we go along. But he's been in and out of the team at times. Started to get a bit more game time in recent weeks, but in general, he's not really hit the ground running this season. He's only got, I think, 1 goal and a couple of assists, but I think he's a real talent. I think there's a lot more to come from him. So I'm going to suggest Hugo Bolin as one. And then the other one, Steve, and this obviously might lead on to our discussion about top of the table. I can't really ignore, you could name 3 or 4 players at Mjällby, to be honest. But I'm going to go with, you said 2 or 3, so I'll name 3, and I'm going to pick both of them from Mjällby because they're doing so well, and then we can obviously talk about them. I'm going to go Elliot Stroud. I think the fullback, he can potentially move to a bigger league. I could see him maybe getting a big move in the not too distant future. He's a 22-year-old left back, really strong. I think if he doesn't move to a bigger Swedish club, then I think he's definitely got potentially a future, maybe in the Netherlands, Belgium, somewhere like that. Maybe even moving to Germany. I think he's a really strong player, good profile, tall sort of left back. He can cross it, he can score, he can get assists. I think he's a really, really good talent. And the other one I would just probably add, who everyone's talking about at this moment in time, is the striker at Mjällby, Abdoulaye Mane. He's a 20-year-old Gambian. He's been on fire this season, of course. He's got multiple goals. And I think that there's not many top strikers around these days, Steve. He recently, not too long ago in April, got a hat-trick against Degerfors. not scored that many in recent weeks, but he's got about 6 or 7 this season in total. I think he's a lively player. He's got a good eye for goal. Another one who gets a lot of shots off, Steve. High XG, a bit of a handful to defend against. So those are going to be my 3 picks, Steve. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or anyone you wanted to select before we move on.
Yeah, the 2 I'm going to go with from Eliteserien, definitely Sondre or Scheta at Sarpsborg. Mentioned him before lots of times. Feel like he's ready for the next step up, really. Probably outside of Eliteserien. And the other selection, I've actually forgotten who I was going to say. Yeah, probably Broholm at Rosenborg. Oh, that's it. No, sorry. Jens Hjetodal at Tromsø. I really like him. Physical, really tall physical midfielder. I think he's got great technicals for a big lad. So those 2 there and Broholm. In terms of Allsvenskan, Brolin is excellent there. It's funny with the Mjällby, I probably would have gone for two other Mjällby players myself, which does lead us into this incredible position that they're in the league table. 30 points on the board after 13 matches. And Hammarby 27, Eikor 26, Elfsborg 25, and Malmo down on 22 points. Elfsborg have got a game in hand, but the others have played 13 matches. I mean, I mentioned, I think, on this pre-season podcast, the last time that we talked, Mjällby's transfer business, has it been underrated over the years? And I think there's a case to say that the actual whole squad is underrated because I think that Nicholas Rokiar, I think he's a hell of a player in midfield. Technically brilliant, but I love the goalkeeper. I could mention a couple more players as well. Suddenly, Mjällby have created this incredible squad roster. And if they can keep it, and that's a big if in it, if they could keep it, I think they're actually legitimate.
Yep, can't disagree. I guess your question is basically, I don't know. Is there a particular question there? Or
well,
just,
I think you know what? I'm going to ask you a question here now. Can Mjällby win the Allsvenskan? Because I was watching them. I think it was actually a game against Norrköping. Actually, they ended up drawing it, a late equaliser against them. But for the first 45 minutes, an hour, I looked at this team and I thought, bloody hell, these guys could actually win the league potentially. If things go their way, you still need a couple of teams to drop off and maybe a season where the points total is not as much. But I looked at their squad and it's a really good squad. Could they win the league?
Well, it's a great question, and I think you've hit the nail on the head, really, in terms of what we just said there. You've asked me to pick 2 or 3 players. I've picked 2, and you've picked 2, and we could probably pick a few more, and it'd all be legitimate, to be honest. Rocky, I think, is a fantastic talent. He can definitely go up a level. I don't know whether it might be sort of, maybe a minor league, maybe not one of the big 5, but he can definitely, he's been one of the players that I'd argue he's been player of the season so far, to be honest, pound for pound. All round game, goals, assists, sort of like arrives in the box like Frank Lampard. He can do the dirty work. He's got a good eye for a pass. I like Herman Johansson, Steve. I think for a fullback, he's done well. The centre backs I think have been really good. You mentioned the goalkeeper. You know what? Funnily enough, you said sort of you were watching and you had a thought in your head that they could be the real deal. I genuinely had this thought at the weekend. They were playing Varnamo, who've had a tough season. Obviously, changed their manager. Things have not been going too well for them, but because of the manager change, it's always that early period, isn't it? Trying to impress a new manager, the team ups its game a little bit. It was a tough game, Steve. It was sort of ticking on, and it got to sort of the last 20 minutes. And normally a Mjällby side, they're not a big club traditionally. Those sort of smaller clubs, when they're struggling against a smaller team like that, maybe sometimes they can have an off day and it just doesn't go their way. They might concede one and then they lose, and then it's kind of like you have that battle in your mid-table. But they just made some changes. Torstenson made some brilliant changes on the hour mark. Stevie brought me in three subs, and they all paid off basically pretty much almost immediately. Alexander Johansson came off the bench and scored twice, and that was it pretty much. Team dispatched, and they remained top of the league. And it was a big game, Steve, because results elsewhere had meant that they kind of had to win to stay top and clear. And obviously they've got teams closing in on them, other teams who are trying to chase them for the title. So it was a really big win. And in that match, I'd have to agree with you. I came out of it thinking, you know what? These lot are the real deal. Now, I think it's funny because you say they're underrated. I think almost every single person at that club is underrated. I think the sports director's underrated. I think the manager's underrated. I think the assistant coaches are underrated. I mean, Steve, we're working on potentially, hopefully, getting a guest who is one of the backroom staff there. He's got a PhD in unbelievable qualifications, Steve, and we'll talk about him. He follows us on X, and if we do manage to get him on the show, we'll talk with him. I think the backroom staff is underrated. Like I say, I think the sporting director, the players they've identified, brought in and sold, I think that's underrated. I think the whole setup's underrated, Steve, and they're doing unbelievably well. But I would have a caveat here, and I do think now, as we enter that summer break, we are in that period now where we'll find out, because can they keep all their players? Now, the sporting director did come out recently in recent weeks and say, listen, we want to keep everyone. We don't really want to sell, but the reality is we probably will have to sell. And I think they might have to sell one or two. And it's going to be like, how smart can they be? Which is the one player or two players they can sell, get some good money in, get the finances sorted out, because they are a small club, Meowby, by the beach. And then it's not, two sales, maybe one or two sales that don't massively knock the squad completely off track. And that's a hard one to do, because obviously you could say maybe sell Stroud, you could say maybe sell Mane, but who do you replace them with? Because Mane's brought goals into this team. He's turned them from a functional team to like a team that can get goals as well, and have a real threat up front. It's a tough one, because I think if they lose one or two, that could just knock them. And I think they're not that good enough, Steve, to sort of run away with it. They're going to need every single player firing on all cylinders between now and the end of the season to hold off, because there are some good teams actually at this moment in time. I know Malmo are struggling, but if you look below them, Hammarby, Oikor, they're quite good teams actually. So it will be tough to hold off those clubs. I don't think you can just sort of fluke it all season, if that makes sense. You're going to need to be consistent, and that is the key question. But as of now, Steve, you would not bet against them, because they've got a really strong 11.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking myself, what can they do? I mean, if I was them, I know maybe some people from the club have listened to this podcast before. I would do my utmost to try and keep everyone if I can. You could even get a situation maybe where you arrange a transfer, but the deal goes through at the end of the season, or you get someone back on loan for the end of the season. There's two aspects of this. Is the financial side. Obviously, a club can't turn down good money, and then players' ambition as well. You can't, stop players from wanting to further their career. If you had to sell one player, for me, I would go with the young Gambian lad Mane. I would sell him, because I think, yes, he has brought goals into the team, but a lot of him is the physical attributes, the pace. I think you could maybe replace that if certainly the physical side of it. That defense is really good. Stroud, especially, like you said, I would want to try and keep that defense intact. But that Varnamo game was an interesting one, because really it was a 50-50 game, wasn't it? But they found a way to win it. Perhaps they wouldn't have won that last season. Varnamo weren't too bad at all, but the subs were good. That showed the quality of the squad. I would love to see them go on and win the league, or at the very least get a medal position. It's going to be really hard for them. But I think huge credit to the team that's assembled this squad, the manager. It's a great story, and I don't think enough's been said of it. Like this, if they win the league, it would be it's a village. Meowby is effectively a village. This would be some story. Best of luck to the squad. I tip my hat to everyone there, on the field, off the field. They're doing brilliantly. Long may it continue.
The interesting thing about them, Steve, is that they're usually a smaller club. They can be consistent and they can be good, but you always worry about, okay, when they go to Malmo, or when they go to sort of Oik, or when they go to a big club, how are they going to get on? But ironically, Steve, they've actually been, for the last 2 or 3 years, the team that always beats those teams. They've got a fantastic record away to Malmo. I think they're playing them pretty soon. They've funnily enough, they actually raised their game against the bigger teams. So it was always more teams like Varnamo at home where they might drop points and struggle in the Torstenson era anyway. Do you know what I mean? It was they've shown they can go to teams like Hacken and win. They can beat the big dogs, but it was always more maybe over a consistent season. They just couldn't pick up enough points, especially in maybe the smaller games. So they've proven they can actually beat those teams, and that means that if they can get the consistency against the smaller teams, they're going to take some real doing. I know behind the scenes, obviously, we friend of the pod, Anders Torstenson, we've had a chat with him, and every now and then I'll drop him a text and just sort of say well done. And I know behind the scenes they're confident, Steve. They're not backing down from this challenge. I think to maybe sort of try and really challenge for the title. So watch this space. think they have got some strong contenders. Let's not pretend. I think this
There
is a bit
is.
of a stronger league than recent years. So it's not going to be easy. But hey, why not? 13 games played, Steve, nearly halfway point. I would probably, to be honest, I would actually go the other way. What you said. I don't think if they had to lose a player, it should be Mane. I would sell the goalkeeper. I think they could get the most money for either him or Stroud, and I think you could probably replace him with a pound for pound. I think you could find someone to do 15 games worth who could maybe
Goalkeeper,
just
I'd
about
agree. Yeah, I'd agree with the
goalkeeper.
keeper.
They'd get a lot
That's
of
not a bad call.
they'd get a lot of money for him. He's a very good goalkeeper. I know you like your keeper, Steve, and I think that they could probably find someone on the level. Mane is quite hard to replace unless there's quite a few forwards at the moment doing quite well. Agnero at Halmstad, Diabate at Geis. So maybe they could find someone like that, but I think they'd have to pay quite a bit of money, and I don't know if maybe have the funds to really go out and replace Mane with someone top. So, but watch the space. I think they can definitely challenge top three for sure.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's contenders: Hammarby, Aik, Elfsborg. Elfsborg dangerous. They're not in Europe at all. Got a game in hand. Quite like what they've been doing. Malmo down in fifth place, 22 points. We've got to talk about them here. They are struggling. They've just lost the Swedish Cup final to Häcken as well. Then they've beaten Häcken in the league. But I still think deep down, we know the squad they've got. We know that they've got to be respected. They could close an 8-point cap, couldn't they, Jonathan? Do you see them improving in the second half of the season? They've got Europe to deal with as well. They're guaranteed, I think, at least, they should at worst get into the Conference League groups, you would think, via the Champions route. So they're going to have a lot of games to deal with, but they've got a big squad.
Yeah, ironically, I think I'm more optimistic about them in Europe because I think they've got a big enough squad. I think that's the one benefit of the squad's too. In my opinion, the squad's too big, and I think that's been their massive problem so far this season. They've not really replaced players with sufficient quality. I think we're really realizing how good Nanasi was at this level. In my opinion, I think they've really missed him. They just haven't replaced him, really, to be honest. Even though they got over the line last season, I think you've really seen it this year. They just lack that talisman, maybe. I think some of the signings have been questionable. Haksabanovic, Steve. I still think Oliver Berg is up and down. There's other players, for example, Sigurdsson they got from Blackburn. He's not really set like any trees at the moment. We have to congratulate Beko Hacken. Fantastic cup winners again. They're so good in that cup and they've won it. But Malmo, from that point of view, Steve, it was really interesting after that Malmo defeat because it was on home soil for them. And there was question marks about the manager, Eastrom. Might he lose his job? And Malmo fans are really not happy at the moment. And he came out afterwards and he said, listen, I know what football's like, but things change quickly. And, he's won titles there, but things can change very fast. They're not happy already about seeing Djurgården get to sort of the Conference League semi-finals and Malmo struggling so much in Europe. So he's already on a bit of a back foot there. But this rotation system that he's doing at the moment, he's rotating so much that I think it's costing the team. I mean, we talked about Taha Ali on the last pod. I think they've tried playing him as a number 10 now, maybe, and he did really well in one game, and then he was on the bench again, and it's kind of hit and miss. He's in, he's out. He needs to really sort out his first choice side. I think they're probably going to be in the market. I think in the summer, I think they will, but maybe try and recruit a couple. Botheim, I know he's got an injury. Keith Tellen's getting a bit older now. I think there are some gaps in that squad that they can maybe improve. So, funnily enough, I think they've got a good better chance in Conference League because they've got a big squad to sort of pad it out and go for it. But I think it's costing them a little bit in the league because he's rotating so much. Like you said, I still think they can make up that points gap, Steve. They're the one team who can go on a run. Literally, they could probably win 12 games in a row if they wanted to. They're that good on their day. They could string 8-9 wins and a couple of draws and then blow everyone out of the water. But there's just a bit of discontent lurking there at Malmo, which is something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, they've been far too inconsistent. They've let slip too many easy points. Shout out to EF Core, who beat them 1-0 recently. Again, it kind of summed up Malmo's season. They missed a penalty to equalise. Things haven't been going their way. In terms of the other contenders there, I mean, Core, potential dark horses, Elfsborg as well, but both kind of laid an egg at the weekend. And I mean, Icor lost to Sirius 3-1. You can't be losing there if you want to win titles, although it can be a weird place to go. And then Hammarby won the big game against Elfsborg. Hammarby do look legit. We've talked about them before. They they keep the manager, I think they can go along with it. Icor perhaps surprised you the most, maybe out of the teams in contention, Jonathan?
Yeah, I've been really impressed with I have to say I've been really impressed with Oikor and Elfsborg. I think although they had that blip against Hammarby, Elfsborg have looked really. I think they've gone under the radar as well. To be honest, I know you do like the manager there aesthetically, and I think he's actually gone under the radar a little bit. He's kind of performing quite well this season. I know that they lost a couple of players. Maybe that's why they've just kind of gone under the radar, but they haven't lost their game style, their identity. They've replaced quite well. They're ticking along quite nicely. I think they're definitely in with a shout for European places at least. But Oiko have really impressed me. I think the manager has really managed to sort of. I know he's got such a good track record. He's really managed to ride the storm there at Oiko because they are a bit of a basket case actually behind the scenes. You know, they've had financial problems. They're a bit of an EF Core similar situation, if that makes sense. You know, with the finances, the pressure on them, how bad it's been for the last few seasons. Things haven't really been that great at times with Henningberg and, previous manager as well, who they had to get rid of. He's come in and he's just ridden all that storm quite well. They haven't had a huge amount of changes. He's signed one or two. He signed a couple of players. I think Johan Hove is having a decent season. Songvai, I think it's the Hungarian. He's having a decent season, but he hasn't massively changed a huge amount. Isherwood has obviously come in and done well, but he's really managed to ride the storm and he's found the identity, Steve, of the club, which is based on clean sheets and being solid. And I think he's tapped into that a lot, and that is the classic Oiko, like hard to play against, hard to beat, never write them off. They'll get goals, and he's kind of brought their identity back a little bit, I think, which is really encouraging for them without having to spend too much money or go crazy on transfers. So I'd really look out for Oiko. I think with a couple more additions, I think they could actually be really strong in the second half of the season potentially. And like I say, Elfsborg impressed me. We've talked about Hammarby. I think they're a good side. I do at times worry about them a little bit creatively. I think on the wings they can improve a little bit. Tonekti's had a good start, but I do think with Hammarby I'm a bit sometimes like, have they got enough firepower? Paulos Abraham's not having a massively amazing start to his time there. But otherwise, Hammarby are strong, and I expect them to contend. But I think those top four are looking like you talked about the top four in Norway. I think those are the four that I'm sort of eyeing up and thinking, yeah, they've got a chance.
Yeah, 7 clean sheets for Icor this season. It's interesting that they conceded 3 goals, though, on 3 occasions. So when a match can get out of control, maybe the Gremlins are still there. Just suffered that defeat to Sirius, the first defeat of the season for them. No one really saw that coming at all, did they? Sirius haven't been in particularly good form. No idea really what went wrong for them in that game. But, they are a contender, like you say. Usually when the title isn't going to Malmo, the title goes to Stockholm, doesn't it? And one team who it doesn't look like it's going to go to this season, Djurgården down in 9th. They had a great European run. The Swedish Cup final result was terrible for them. It's knocked them out of Europe. They would have been in the Conference League qualifying. They would have had a good coefficient. You probably would have said Djurgården maybe would have had a good chance to get back into that group stage. But they're down in 9th. Their big rivals are in the top 3. It's not looking great suddenly for Djurgården. We've got them on the list here. Diff, the new Hammarby. This might not be particularly pleasant listening for their fans, Jonathan. They would have loved the European adventure again, wouldn't they, this summer? Because it looks like in the league, they're kind of meandering their way to mid-table mediocrity.
Well, it goes back to the question at the top of the show, doesn't it, from Big Sig? He asked about Glimt and he's asked about Djurgården. Yeah, you know what? I thought this came into my head during the Halmstad game. I thought they were. I was about to say a disgrace, but maybe that's a bit harsh. But I thought they were shocking against Halmstad from start to finish. It was one of those games you couldn't. And if you're a betting man like you are, there was at one point where I thought I'd bet on Halmstad to win this game because Djurgården was so bad. You could see it coming. I mean, they even missed a penalty, Halmstad, and then scored after that. So that summed it up. They got out of jail, and then they still went and conceded and lost. I thought they were embarrassing. They had a double game week. Obviously, we talked about fantasy. They had a double game week, and they sort of managed to scrape together some points. I think they're the lowest goal scoring team in the Eliteserien at this moment in time. I know they've got
8 goals.
Yeah, shocking. But they were really, really poor, Stephen. And I thought it was an intensity thing. I read a tweet, funny enough, Steve, saying is the manager under pressure at Diff, which I found astonishing when I first read it. But then I thought about it and I was like, the Conference League run the problem with Diff is you can't ignore how good that run is. That is, you can't sack a manager after a run like that. And I know he wasn't 100% responsible for it, but he was involved in the latter stages. The good feel good factor at the club, there's a massive feel good factor, but I think there is a little bit of discontent lurking underneath that as well in terms of how bad they've been this season because, you know, they have massive rivals with AIK and Hammarby, and they are looking way up at the table at them at this moment in time. And I just don't think it's probably good enough. Now, the reason that I thought this in the game, Steve, where I suddenly thought to myself, do you know what, a diff turning into Hammarby. Now, my reason for saying that is because you know how, Steve, we've always, when we do these season previews, the criticism of Hammarby has always been good team, nice to watch, big stadium, good fan base, but their whole squad is set up to just sell players and make money from the player sales. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, are they even going to keep those players long enough to benefit from them to actually challenge for the title? Whereas before, Djurgården were more of like, they've got experienced players, they go for the title. They might not sell huge amounts, they'll sell some, but under Boss Anderson, they've sold a lot of players, but it was always Hammarby that were kind of like, they would have those young talents. And I always used to say, I didn't really take them seriously in the title race because you knew that their squad was geared towards maybe selling players. But I look at Diff's team now, and I'm starting to think, are they going down that avenue? And has it gone too far a bit? If you look at the team that played against Halmstad, you've got a lot of young talents in there. But I looked at some of them, and I'm like, I'm not sure if are these players here just to sell? Do you know what I mean? Are they looking to just get some money for these players, and are they actually good enough to challenge for the title? And I'm not really convinced that some of them are. Steve, if you go through the team, I mean, he rotated it a lot, the Honkavara against Halmstad, but they had players like Khalifa Jalvala, who's 19. He came in, got taken off at halftime, got dragged. He was terrible. Matthias Siltonen, an 18-year-old in midfield. Okay, he's got a really good future. He's meant to be very highly rated. They've got Gullikson, Mulugeta. So basically, they had an 18-year-old, Steve, and two 18-year-olds, sorry, and a 21-year-old as their midfield three. They had a 25-year-old Harala who apparently is already up for sale now. He's not really fitted into the team that well. On the wing, they had a 19-year-old up front, and then they, for some reason, played Victor Berg as a sort of left winger, which I thought he was awful, to be honest. But I just looked at this team and I thought, they've got Kosugi, 19-year-old left back. He's already been linked with like Celtic. There's already rumours he might be sold. That's another one that they kind of bring in. He'll probably move on quite quickly. Are they turning into sort of like Hammarby, where it's like we buy? If you look at Lucas Bergvall, he's the big example, isn't he? At the end of the day, who went to Spurs, came into the team. They literally had a plan in place for him. You're gonna be here 6 months to a year, and then we're gonna make money out of you, make 10 million or whatever. Funny enough, they've got his brother Theo Bergvall playing right back at the moment. So he's another one you look at and think, well, if he does well, how long will he be there? And I just think that maybe the balance of the squad. I mean, Steve, funny enough, they brought on Alexander Anderson. He's the youngest player in Allsvenskan history. Came on at 15 years old. People are saying he's going to be like the next big thing. So I'm just wondering, is the balance just? It's all good having young players and sort of trying to buy and sell. But ironically, Steve, this is Djurgården's arguably one of their best ever years in terms of finances. They've made so much money from Europe. But this is the one year maybe you don't need to have a young talent to sell. This is the year that you can sort of like double down a bit. That came in my head a little bit. Are Diff sort of turning into this buy and sell model that Hammarby have always been known for, whereas Hammarby are sort of now turning into the Diff and going for the title and actually having more experienced players who can do the job, like likes of Basara, and people who will win you a title, Pinas and more experienced players who will win you a league. So there's a bit of maybe a dynamic shift there in Stockholm, which I found quite interesting. Hopefully Djurgården fans aren't going to shout me down for saying that suggestion. I know they won't be happy being compared to their rivals, but that did pop into my head a little bit in recent weeks.
Yeah, I think they've got a bit of a problem this season now because I just don't see them getting back into the top 3 or 4 from this. I think the strength at the top of the table is too much to make up. They would have loved the European run, even if it was just in the qualifiers. It would have been a perfect season, wouldn't it, to be in the group stage? They could have put all their eggs into that basket. I'm going to give them a little bit of slack here, Jonathan, because I'm sure there'll be some fans listening, and I know what they'll say. They'll be saying injuries, and they have had a ton of injuries. They've got players that have hardly even played minutes this season in Allsvenskan, Felenius, Schuler, Zugay, Asland. The goalkeeper, I think, as well, Nielsen Southquist got injured in the Conference League duty. So that is the thing. But I mean, in terms of it's just no goals, is there? I mean, Toki in Gwen, I like the player, but he's not the man to lead the line, is he? He's someone who you would play probably left wing cutting inside, really good with someone, certain partnership. But I mean, he scored one goal. I don't know what do they do for the rest of the season? Do they sort of, I don't want to say sack it off? Do they get themselves in a position where, right, start of 2026, we're going for the title, sort of thing, by getting the right players in? I really like that Kosugi, like you said, and Bergvall probably. How good is he compared to his brother? He could probably get a move on name alone. Yeah, I think it's tricky times for Yoga. I don't think it's all bad though, but they've got to decide what direction they go in the next sort of 10 months, really, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think you make a fair point there. Injuries have hampered them. Then that's a massive problem. You can't really ignore that, and that's come as part of their European run. They've had some bad injuries in that sense, but I still think that the general squad is trending a bit younger. If you look at it overall, if you look at the players they've signed, the sort of types of profiles they're looking for now, it's like younger players with a resale value at a much earlier age compared to in the past. I think if you look at like maybe team when they won the title, for example, players like Buya Toure, they were still young, but they weren't sort of 18 years old. If that makes sense, you need some time to bed in and settle in the league. I agree with you, and Gwen's not the man maybe up front. Funnily enough, there was a big argument him and Boss Anderson after the Hampstead game. They were sort of like waving each other arms at each other, and something clearly wasn't. And Gwen probably wasn't happy about something. Maybe it was being left out of the team. They weren't sort of too happy with each other. There's a lot behind the scenes as well that differ at the moment, Steve. Quite a few directors and stuff have stepped down. There is sort of rumblings going on behind the scenes, which is a bit of a shame, really, because they have had, like we say, their best ever run in Europe. They've made history in what they've achieved this season. So I'm not getting on their back. It's more, and they can have an off season. And I agree with you. I think not being involved in Europe, I think that cup final is a massive blow for them, because I think that's going to knock their entire campaign really now. They've now got to sort of almost rebuild for next season. So this season's almost dead really by sort of May. The Chelsea game was probably the highlight. And when you've got sort of 6 months left of the season to go at least, that's probably not what you want really, is it? But they've had the highs and they've enjoyed that massive run. It's come at maybe a little bit of a cost in the league. They'd probably take that if you had asked them about it. But mate, yeah, not being in Europe is a massive, I think, blow for them. But I do also think that there's sort of changes behind the scenes. And if you're looking towards next season, I think they need to sort of really think about what kind of profiles do they want to take them on to really start to challenge. Because at this moment in time, I just don't think the squad's, if we're looking at it for next season, I don't think the squad's good enough without significant reinforcements to challenge next season. So
we know
yeah,
they've got the money, though. We know that they've got money there to sign, and that's the way I see it. The best thing they can do is finish as well as they can 2025 and gear up for an actual challenge next season. If not win the title, get back in the top three. That's what they've got to do. They've got to assemble the squad. That Halmstad fixture, by the way, for them, that is an absolute graveyard for Djurgården. The last 4 visits for them there have been 0-0, a 2-0 loss, a 1-0 loss, and another 1-0 loss. Like, they haven't even scored at Hampstead in the last 4 visits. So it feels like they have some big problems in that fixture. And a big result down at the bottom of the table for Hampstead as well gets them out of the relegation zone. Oster, after a bad start, have improved, a bit like Brinner in Norway. Maybe starting to find a bit of life there. Bromma are down there. Varnamo still winless. Oster down in 14th place, but they're going to sell a player, Jonathan. That could be crucial in this survival battle.
Yeah, and in terms of the relegation battle, I mean, we didn't actually talk about it, did we, on the podcast? The fan at the EF Core match who attacked an Oster player.
Yeah, that was bad.
That was crazy. And the manager, English manager, Martin Foyston, he came out and said it's one of the darkest days in Swedish football history. I mean, luckily the player avoided it, and he was trying to punch him from behind, wasn't he? But yeah, Oster's are sort of struggling down the bottom there. They look good at times. They remind me a little bit of Westeros in the fact that they're quite good, but just maybe lacking in results at times. But as you've said there, Steve, they've had a bit of I suppose you could say it's good or bad news depending on how you want to look at it. They've sold a player literally in the last 24 hours. Yusuf Sanyang, Steve, he will be moving to Slavia Prague. It's Oster's most expensive sale ever. And the sporting director, Christian Yadler, has come out and said we're proud to make a deal of this magnitude. He's not been in the league long in terms of Allsvenskan, Steve. Obviously, they just got promoted He started really well. He looked quite lively. He's a very sort of tall, leggy Gambian player. He's kind of got the physique and the frame. He looks an athlete, proper athlete. And it's not taken long, Steve. They've sold him. He's 19 years old. As I say, it's a record sale. So I think that is a bit of a blow for them in terms of their forward line, because I think at times they can look a little bit toothless. Reportedly, it's about €3 million roughly, plus bonuses maybe involved there to take it maybe closer to sort of maybe €3.5 million total. Massive amount of money for a team like for a team like Osters who've just come up. Of course, he's only been there about just over a year, I think, roughly. So it's good and bad for them. I think they will be in that relegation battle. I have to say, Hamstad, Steve, I find them impossible to predict this season. I think they're like they really frustrate me as a team. I think I can't work out if at times they're defensive. They play bigger teams and they do well. I think Bromma have been quite a disappointment this season as well. They're down there. So, we're going to have an exciting relegation. But I think Varnamo, of course, have been down there. They've lost their manager. So, yeah, we've got an exciting times at the bottom of the table as well, I think, this season.
That Sanyang, I remember him now. I've actually gone back to a tweet that I did on April 29th. It was Malmo against Ulster. And I said, Malmo don't have any rhythm right now. They won 2-0. But it was not convincing. And I finished the tweet by saying, impressive performance from Yusufa Sanyang for Osters. He is one to watch. So I remember him. He really caught my eye in that game against Malmo. So this is not a surprise to me. He's a player. Absolute baller.
Did anyone in the Czech Republic like that tweet, Steve? Because maybe you started
it. Yeah. Only 4 people liked the tweet.
Was any of them Czech?
I deserve more traction. I can tell a player a mile off like that sometimes.
Slavia Prague liked it enough to buy him. So, yeah.
It's a great signing. I think he could go on to... He could become even better than that level.
I think he'll play in like Liga or something. He's got that. He's just got that sort of athleticism. He looks like a proper athlete, if that makes sense.
Yeah, big loss for Ulster. It's going to be a close relegation battle. I've got a feeling. I mean, Varnamo looks rough for them. They'll do well to survive from here, but the other spots could be anyone right now. Even the likes of Degerford starting to pick up some bad form again. So it'll be a good battle as always. Anything to add before we close out the show, Jonathan?
No, I think that's it, really. I think we covered quite a lot. So,
hold on, Allsvenskan Fantasy. I've got to mention the league leader here, and it is someone called Miron Hu Ross Bullen with 965 points. He is, he leads the whole thing. He leads the whole. He leads overall. He's number 1, and he's in the NFP league. Ross Bullen, do get in touch. This is like I just saw him. He's so far clear of the guy in second place on our league. I'm like, wow, this fella must be so high. But Ross Bullen is having an absolute incredible season on Allsvenskan Fantasy. He's already 70 points clear at the top of the NFP league. But that's going to take some catching. I had one very good round. I tell you what, it's my favourite chip in all of fantasy. Park the bus. And every year, I always do it on the double game week. And every year, I seem to get lucky, Jonathan, and clean sheets hit. I think I hit 177 points that round. Someone nearly got, I think, 200 points in that round where there was a lot of part of the bus chips. I think Fantasy Premier League should do that chip. I love that chip. 5 captains in defence. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
That chip always screws me over every year. And you've got me again on that one. I didn't use it, and now I'm way behind you. But my problem this season has been captains. My choice of captain has been terrible every week, and it's really costing me at the moment. I can't quite get the captains right. But that is an incredible lead for the lad that you've just mentioned there. So fair play to him.
Yeah, Ross Bullen, brilliant stuff, and good luck. I mean, he's from England. He's in the English, got the English flag there.
I wonder if he listens.
Well, you would hope so if he's in the league.
I
only just noticed how far clear he was. How far clear? I mean, he's only 1 point clear overall from someone called.
Who was his captain last week?
He captained. Who did he captain? Rokia.
Decent choice.
But I mean, he's had an incredible run. I'm just looking now. He's been in the top 100 for the last 6 rounds. He's absolutely smoked it really right from the
That
off.
means
So
is that 2 ink? We've got Tom Bird. We've got Tom Bird, top of Norway, and we've got. Did you say Ross Bullen?
Ross Bullen, yeah.
That's an English double, isn't it? Top of both leagues. Fair play.
I mean, round 11. Oh God, yeah. He's used the dynamic duo in round number. Where are we? Round number 11, and he uses dynamic duo on. He used it on Tokmak Gwen and Gullikson for Djurgården. I wasn't interested in any of their players for that double game week. Just shows you how poor they've been. But Gullikson's got him 42 points and Gwen's got him 24. So, I mean, he's used that chip up. I think he's used part of the bus as well. Yeah, he did use part of the bus the same round that I used. And he's used Lone Rangers. So he's out of chips. He's out of chips, Jonathan. So that's tricky. But hey, he's got
there
his
for the
reward.
hunting. He's there for the hunting, but he's got a healthy lead there.
Can he stay there? You've got more chips than McDonald's left, haven't you? You have.
I've got every chip left.
I've got to use my wild card. But by the way, for those who haven't used their wild card in Allsvenskan fantasy, you have to use it this round. Otherwise, you will lose it before round 13. It's a rule. So I have to use my wild card.
I've used it already.
But I nearly got caught out by that.
You get 2 wild cards in this week.
Yeah, you'll get a second one after this round. The next round's complete. So, I've got to do it, and I'm looking at getting in. The guy that really interests me is the Elfsborg striker, former Molde, Frederick Ehler. Been on absolute fire.
A lot of people have got him.
Really like what I see from him. I didn't rate him at Molde at all. Maybe it was the club.
It's funny how you didn't rate Tonekti, did you, either? And he's done all right at Hammarby. It's always quite funny that
I think sometimes you've got to judge players on their previous club is maybe just not a good place to be, right? Haugesund were terrible, Molde environment's bad. Players can thrive in. Look at Anthony, Betis this season. He was incredible.
Well, I looked at him in the Conference League final, to be fair, and I didn't see much of him. So.
Well, he's not a Premier. I think really look at that. Maybe certain players suit certain leagues. Like it's clear Anthony thrives in La Liga, but against Premier League opponents, maybe that's not his thing.
Cucurella had him on lock, to be fair, and I was expecting bigger things from him in that game. But no, you're right. Of course, it's about environment, it's about fit, it's about culture, about many other things. And we will talk more about that, of course, in weeks to come. But for now, you've had your fill. Off you go. Go and sort your fantasy teams out if you haven't joined the leagues yet and get involved. But great to be with you, Steve, as always. And hopefully you've enjoyed the show. If you have, please subscribe or drop us a follow, drop a like, drop a comment. Support the podcast, share it. You can also find us on patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast if you want to sort of support us with monthly contributions, buy us a beer, a coffee. That helps us keep going into those late nights. But for now, that'll be it. Steve, unless you've got anything pressing to add, we'll be back soon. We've got a few weeks off for the break. We'll be a bit more transfer focused probably in weeks to come. But and maybe a couple more guests, as I mentioned. I've got potential guests coming in from Mjalby, hopefully, which we'll talk about if we get that over the line, Steve. But for now, from me, that's all I've got to say. Thanks for listening.
More to add. Thank you again for listening, everyone. Enjoy the international break. Enjoy the Club World Cup, and we'll be back for more at the end of the month. Possibly an interview. Don't laugh. You'll be into it. Trust me. No, everyone's rubbish in it, but there's nothing else on, so everyone's going to love it in the end, Jonathan. That's what happened.
To be fair, you were the one who said that. You're the only person actually who said anything enthusiastic about it. And I looked at the leagues and I was like, you know what? Steve might be onto something here. Maybe it could be interesting. But I am a bit of a skeptic about these tournaments because there's so much football that it's hard to sort of switch off at times. But
we will make an Auckland City supporter out of you yet. So, all right. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time on the Nordic Football Podcast. Take care. And as I say, stay safe during the international break and hopefully see you in a few weeks' time. Goodbye.